what I'm going to do, I'm going to read a little bit from my novel, The Black Bottom, the one that just won this wonderful award that I'm so juiced about. And from the back cover, I talk about where the name came from, The Black Bottom, and then I talk a little about the novel. I'm going to read from that back. About the area known as the Black Bottom. It was an area of Detroit, was a neighborhood that served as ground zero for Detroit's contribution to jazz. Every major industrial city had them, the speakeasies, the blind pigs, the underbelly dives that were the testing ground and launching pad of America's greatest art form, jazz. It was in these back alley late night watering holes where musicians banded together for the voyaging of jazz. This was jazz in its adolescence, the raw, untamed, devil-may-care youth of jazz. The title, The Black Bottom, harkens back to an even earlier time in Detroit's history when the city was an agricultural community and the Low Basin was legendary for its rich black soil. There's some poetic beauty in this area transitioning from the cultivation of agriculture to the cultivation of music culture. Today, the neighborhood of the Black Bottom is buried under thousands of tons of freeway, but the voices of the people entombed there and the music they generated call out from beneath a stone. The Black Bottom is what they have to say. That's about the area. About the novel. The Black Bottom is a novel noir, psychological thriller set in the roar of 1927 Detroit. Our protagonist, Caleb Kirka, is a man without memory, locked in amnesia as a result of a violent beating. Caleb's narration unfolds of a young man who is at once an owner of an underground speakeasy, a Purple Gang affiliate, and a piano player in the seedier speakeasies of Detroit. Caleb will need to recover his history quickly if he is to have any hope of avoiding his demise. Jazz, amnesia, the Roaring Twenties, Prohibition, gang wars, union wars, and 1927 Detroit are all explored in this psychological thriller. So that's the background. I'm going to focus on one of the characters, and I've had to grab different places from different parts of the novel to bring her out. First, you'll have to know who some of the characters are, so I'm going to introduce him. Caleb Kirka, who you've heard about already, is our main protagonist. He has amnesia. He's a jazz pianist and a co-owner of a speakeasy. Beethoven Jones is Caleb's partner in the speakeasy and a bassist with their band. The band is called Jazz du Jour. Their speakeasy is named Temple Bar, Speakeasy, and Play Nice, often just called the Temp, and it's Caleb and Beethoven Jones speakeasy. The Temp is also a black and tan club. For those who don't know, a black and tan was a mixed race club, frowned upon in most places in America and illegal in many cities. So it's where black and white people gathered. And they were called black and tans. Jazz du Jour is Caleb and Beethoven's jazz band. Here's the character I'm going to be focused on. Nika Nightingale is Caleb's girlfriend and the singer in Jazz du Jour. You need to know one more thing, and that is a blow-off. A blow-off is an after-hours jazz jam, when the bar doors close up after the last call and the jazz cats cut loose. That was called a blow-off. One other thing, Louis Armstrong, Satchmo, is going to make a cameo appearance. He makes a cameo in the book, and he'll make a cameo in this little reading here. Now I can get to Nika. And some of you might have heard this reading before. And what I'm going to try to do is make my mistakes in different places so it'll be fresh for you. And here we go. This is how the boys met Nika. Caleb Kirka and Beethoven Jones were barely out of their teens, but were already seasoned veterans of Detroit's club scene. 3 sets into the gig, halfway through the night, and the duo of Jazz du Jour were rocking the house. 3 straight up tempo tunes had the crowd hopping and bopping on the dance floor, and it was time to give the feet a rest. Breaking into a mournful ballad, Caleb laid back on the squeeze box into a slow shuffle, and Jones began dragging his bow across the big bass fiddle with a soul that dug deep into his African derivation. On occasion, a local musician would take the stage with the boys, singing or playing the instrument of their calling. In this manner, the boys would at times find themselves accompanied by banjos and bugles and bagpipes and hurdy-gurdies, all manner of musical mayhem. The boys loved this venture as they would get a taste of the regional flavor. Often enough, though, these rural honky-tonks served up amateurs without enough time spent woodshedding their chops. The musicianship in these backcountry honky-tonks was a hit or miss proposition. She was a little girl, Nika was. She was dressed in a flower print rag of a dress with hair disheveled. She tottered on scuffed heels that lifted her up to a grand height of maybe 5 feet. Maybe. The black curly hair and the slightest knot on the bridge of her nose gave away her Jewish heritage. Her smile was tentative as she took to the stage, her nervousness evident. Jones nodded to Caleb, and Caleb looked at the girl with some reservation. Too often, a local singer would join the boys on stage, pumped up on the adoration of their parents' blind belief in the talent of their tone-deaf offspring. Caleb and Jones had become well-versed in nursing a pitch-crippled singer through an arrangement. They braced themselves for the worst. Softening their instruments to accommodate the vocals, Caleb found the girl's key, and the boys readied themselves to jump in on the first measure that this pretty young vixen began to falter. But the falter never came. The little girl opened her mouth and belted the blues in a voice that was well acquainted with the blues. She was acquainted with the blues in the first person. Her voice was raspy and warm and powerful. Where the hell did she get that power in that little frame? She sang with a vision that could see the greatest depths of the tortured soul. Where the hell did she get that vision? She sang with the authority of the spirit that had been bruised by the worst. And she sang with the character of the survivor. Nika coaxed the life from the tune as she nursed the song's pain in her tender, throaty tone. Caleb and Jones shared pleas, relieved smiles, and slipped their accompaniment under this little philosopher of croon. I'm going to jump a few chapters forward and pick up another place where she's with the band. This is years later, and she's with the band and singing with the jazz band. Nika is part of the band. This is called When Nika Sang the Flat Five. To call the blues is not a misnomer. The blues offered the beaten, the downtrodden, the lost some small comfort in their world of hurt. The blues carried a gut bucket of angst filled to the brim. A pentatonic minor scale with a flat five, that is the blues scale, a scale that is rooted deep in the African continent, deep in the African people. It is in that flat five that you will find the blues voodoo. It is in that flat five where hearts are broken and souls are rounded up and branded. Like a flicker of a feeble flame on a dark and starless night, the flat five offers sanctuary against the blackness of the howling and the growling in the furtive shadows. The drugs were surging through Nika's veins now, her body a rush, giving her body a rush and her sight some bravado. It was this synthetic bravado that brought her to the stage, to the microphone. It was this bravado that allowed her access through her voice to her pain, to her minor blues with the flat five. Rich and deep and smoky, her voice was an echo, a sonorous echo that resonated from her personal pain and ricocheted around the collective pains of humankind. Nico's echo was a pain that had an upbringing on a rural dairy farm in Houghton, Michigan, on a dead-end dirt road called Bliss Gate. Hers was a pain that witnessed her father die, crushed in the overturned Alice Chalmers tractor in a cornfield. It was a pain that beheld her mother remarry Big Joe, a violent drunkard who molested Nika and her younger sisters. Nika's pain was a pain that stood watch at too many beatings suffered by her mother at the hands of Big Joe. It was a pain that, at 10 years old, suffered through her deflowering under the sweaty and alcoholic stench of Big Joe. It was a pain that, at 17 years young, took the family shotgun, her biological father's shotgun, and blew a hole in Big Joe's chest, the size of the Liberty Bell. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Good God Almighty, let freedom ring. Through her dark and cavernous voice, through her flat five voice, Nika championed the ration of the abused, the forgotten, and the disenfranchised. At the microphone, Nika sang for the beatings endured by her mother, and she cried for the rape of her sisters. It was a misery perched on chastity's loss, and it was a misery that the black and tans knew well. Nika sang, and the walls of the Temple Bar speakeasy and Play Nice seemed a little wider, the roof a little higher. When Nika sang, the congregation breathed a little deeper. their personal crucifix lightened on their shoulders. Nika's voice was a voice that rang ancestral. Her voice chimed with grief and sorrow and the agony of the common bonds that united the souls of the European serfs and the African slaves. When Nika belted the blues, the heavens cried in angst, and when Nika softly sang of love and hope, hell was humbled. Bottles did not clink and chairs did not scrape the floor when Nika sang Flat Five. Voices fell silent when Nika sang the blues, when Nika sang these subterranean blues. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring. Good God Almighty, let freedom ring. Now I'm going to jump forward to a later chapter, and we're going to get to meet Satchmo in this chapter, and this will be the last chapter. Satchmo's and Nika's blow-off. The temp was abuzz when word spread that Satchmo would be jamming with the house band. All of the familiar local cats were there with their respective instruments in the hopes of being invited to share their chops with the underground legend that was Satchmo. This would be a blow-off that none would blow off. As for the temp dance floor, it was shoulder to shoulder in sweaty anticipation of unexplored horizons. Jazz du jour, having already played a set, was tuned, warmed, and primed for their jam with Satchmo Armstrong. For this special occasion, Beethoven Jones was wrestling with new catguts on his bass. Leon Barwood was spitting up a new reed on his saxophone, and Nika Nightingale was in the alley, spiking her arm with courage. Once tuned, Satchmo looked out from the stage to the black and white and brown and yellow faces in the Black and Tan Club, and with a laugh he croaked, "Mama warned me about nights like this." With a smile full of endless teeth, Louis rasped, "Let the revelry begin." And at that, he began the festivities by playing a soliloquy of the cavalry's revelry on his trumpet, leading the charge into the night. As Satchmo's solo call to arms waned, the entire band, on cue, launched into Armstrong's hit song, Heebie-Jeebies. Satchmo got the heebie-jeebies, and Jazz du jour got the heebie-jeebies, and the Temple Bar Speakeasy and Play Nice got the heebie-jeebies, and the joint was jumping with heebie-jeebies. Satchmo's world of this newfangled music called jazz was a cornucopia of jazz. Satchmo's trumpet was a horn of plenty. When Satchmo trumpeted jazz, there was beef in the pauper's porridge, and there was light at the end of the tunnel. In Satchmo's oral world of jazz, there were no lonely hearts and no broken bones, and there were no lost souls. In Satchmo's world of jazz, there was a God in heaven. When Satchmo trumpeted, "When the saints go marching in," Gabriel conceded the pulpit. The blow-off was blowing off, and Satchmo was blowing off, and Jazz du jour had blown off the temp when Nika was invited to the stage. Bound in a hip-clingy flapper drop waist black dress and T-strap 3-inch spikes, I was hoping I could get through that. Nika Nightingale looked like the exclamation point at the end of a suggestive limerick. The stage itself was a dais in the back corner of the Temple Bar Speakeasy and Play Nice and raised 2 feet over the dance floor. Stage left near the piano offered the singular step onto the platform. The longer leg players would often skip the footstep and just stride directly up onto the rostrum. Little Nika always used the step. "We're going to have a local number join us for a swing or two," Satchmo announced with his gravel grin. Satchmo was a contracted name of Satchel Mouth, a tribute to his ever-present display of beaming teeth. Sharing the flash with the house, he announced, "Y'all know her as Nika Nightingale." Then he rasped to Nika, "Come on up here, baby, and give us a throw." Nika was fresh from the alleyway, and the heroin was surging a warm rush through her veins. She made the footstep okay, but the step up onto the stage reached out and grabbed her foot, and she stumbled headlong toward the platform floor. She would have made it, too, if August Penny had not swung around on the piano bench and caught her mid-fall. The speakeasy went silent as Nika righted herself and twitched the angles of her dress back onto her curves. Only the heroin swamping her veins mitigated her embarrassment. Quick to recover, Satchmo put the house at ease, smiling with a satchel full of teeth. "The little lady's ready to explode with a drone," and the patrons laughed. And then to Nika he added, "Come on up here, little one. Let's me and you fill us up a decanter of jazzum." The band was full tilt in 2 measures. Louis Armstrong was center stage of the cacophony, beaming full and toothy. Nika Nightingale was on her best game. She was in the moment. She was in a place one gets to in meditation and in prayer. Nika was universal, and she was of the singular moment. She was singing the full history of mankind. Nika was chanting the first ever ancestral words around a dank fire pit, and she was crooning the future chronicles of humankind's prospect. Nika was singing on high, on high. Nika Nightingale sang from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, letting her voice channel the full breadth of the pain and the ecstasy of the human experience. When Nika sang on high, it was pure like the first snow and real like a grandmother's fable. And it had the energy that tapped the shoulders of angels and cooed sweet nothings into their wings. And the colored girls standing stage side felt missed for their fellow gender trekker and said things like, Jesus is suffer gonna snatch that girl aloft, and give that girl air for she spark. And every voice in the Temple Bar speakeasy and play nice rejoiced the rapture and joined in the ecstasy. And when Nika sang on the lowdown, the pain and the agony oozed from the melody with a pitchfork and a hammer, and the cries rang so deep that memory dug down to the dawn of man, and Eve was thrown from the garden to bear her monthly blood cycle with babies at her feet and wolves at the door, and the mist-colored girls cried, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And Nika's voice was one with the moon and sister to the shadows. When Nika jumped into Nika's moment, into Nika's deliverance, he lifted her high on the wings of his golden trumpet, and her voice was delivered naked like honesty and pure like the child of Joseph and Mary to the salvation that waited on the banks of the Jordan River. The revelers cried in their joy and they wept in their sorrow, and every soul in the Temple Bar, speakeasy, and play nice filled with the wisdom of the Holy Sacrament. Prayers were offered and answered in the same breath, in Nika's and Satchmo's blow-off. This was a blow-off for the ages. This was a blow-off of every forebear spirit, of their plight and their rapture that had ever tread the rich soil of the Black Bottom and beyond. Jazz du jour, with Nika leading the charge and Satchmo trumpeting the cause, stepped outside of the contrivance of human time and became one with the cosmos, one with the universe, and one with the heavens. One.